Hello, everyone, and welcome back. So we'll be continuing the conference with domestic infrastructure of food. Luan Li is a Chinese architect, educator, and researcher whose professional and academic work focuses on interior and urban realms and the articulation of spaces and societies. He is an assistant professor of architecture at the University of Colorado, Denver, colleague of mine. So welcome.
Thanks, Charles. Okay, please allow me to share screen first. Hi, everyone. I hope you are having a great day and enjoying the conference so far. My name is Liuan Li. I'm assistant professor of architecture at CU Denver College of Architecture and Planning. So I'm currently in Puerto. My Wi-Fi connection hasn't been the best. So if there's any unexpected disruption, please let me know. And also, I hope that I navigated the technology correctly. Hopefully, you're not seeing my note. So before my presentation, I would like to thank everyone for being here and also for inviting me to talk about my work, which is called domestic infrastructure of food. Before I unpack my project, I would like to talk a little bit more about my research focus, which is very relevant in how we perceive architecture nowadays. So my research focus on the intersection between the interior and architecture. So interior is often understood as the inner space of the building, and the built environment is considered as an inner layer and one of the fundamental categories of architecture. How we perceive our domestic, territory, and how we perceive like the interior of a building. You can understand the conventional way of understanding the interior is really about the inside, the physical inside of the building. And urbanism, how we normally will understand, will approach, is the ways in which the urban environment is organized, the organizations and qualities of exterior spaces between buildings are both important measures to urbanism. So traditionally, interior and urbanism have been positioned at divergent scales of spatial practice. And acting as a mediator, architecture has been called to structure the divide between these two. However, the last century, as we all are experiencing, has witnessed a rapid construction of vast interior spaces, well engineered by revolutionary technologies, such as shopping malls, airport. These are all considered as these vast interior spaces. With this, the powerful apparatus pumped by machine of capitalism, the grand interior has preceded and superseded architecture by dissolving its boundary and collapsing its appearance. So here is a drawing by ArchiZoom, which look into this kind of like, the optimate forms of capitalism in architecture and propose, a device that counteract this kind of like, capitalism, which remove architecture from, the canvas, only presenting movable, flexible interior objects that essentially, create different habitats or create different, behaviors. By removing the role of architecture from the equation, the emergence of the interior becomes a new world of infinite projection and subjection. This new world is senseless, formless, and endless. It engulfs every project of capitalist world into a seamless whole, which includes shopping malls, airport, gallery, and so on and so forth. Diagnosed by Rem Koolhaas as junk space, which is really a good term coined to describe, this kind of like endless connection between airport, between shopping mall, which essentially blend how we understand our physical belongings and our physical existence in the urban environment. So that was a pretty big critique to interior urbanism, which is how we understood as a kind of like formless urbanism, posing certain challenge to our working environment. So because of all this, I start to focus on two things: the agents, which is the agencies of the interior. So I asked two questions, how we understand interior and architecture nowadays. The first one is, amidst social, environmental, and political complexities, how does the agency of interior architecture manifest itself through its expression of form, function, materialities, and technology? The second question that I will ask is, how do we position the role of interior architecture and seek alternative modes of operation to expand the disciplinary boundaries that engage the challenge of our time? So this is kind of like research background. Hopefully it wasn't too jumpy, but I just wanted to give you a preview of my the kind of context I'm currently my research is currently operating within. It investigates the medium of the interior and its objects as an infrastructure of care to unpack the injustice of our urban landscapes, examining ecological, political, and social issues in relation to living crisis, especially around food supplies, affordable housing, and accessibility to interior public spaces. One idea to approach that is through public interior, which serve as idea and project. It investigates, this kind of like large interior public spaces that serve as joint in the network of urban public spaces. The second one, which is the one that I'm going to talk about today, is about domestic interior and object as instrument. Understanding interior and interior objects as productive instruments to engage the ever-changing urban environment. It investigates the programming of domestic typologies and interior objects, seeking spatial possibility at a bodily scale to reconstruct the relationship between the interior architecture and city. So the project Balconies domestic infrastructure of care fall under the second category, which evolve around domestic objects as instrument. It's centered around the informal and the small. It was on view at the Bi-City Biennale of Urbanism and Architecture in Shenzhen and Hong Kong in 2023, which is a Biennale project that took place last year. The project stemmed from my observation on the trend of domestic farming in Asia during the enduring lockdown in the pandemic and limited access to food ingredient and social interaction. The emergence of growing vegetables in informal domestic spaces have been emerging, such as rooftops and balconies. It has also promoted domestic activities of making and cooking food in families and sharing homemade ingredient with their neighbors. So during the pandemic, as some of you may be aware, China went through a very stringent quarantine process because of everybody was super scared of any like body interaction or any personal interaction. So people started to grow vegetables at home. And they started to share their homemade ingredient with their neighbor. So this in many ways accelerate this trend of domestic farmings in China, and it happens to in other countries too, in Japan, in Thailand. So all of a sudden, domestic farming became, a primary support for nutrition or primary support for social activities. So the introduction of agriculture and social interaction into the domestic realm, which is where we live, not only expands the prescribed meanings of these spaces, but also foregrounds the domestic interior as the infrastructure of care that supports spatial and social possibility of everyday life. So, and at such moments of social and political uncertainties, we as designer look back and re-examine some canonical work such as Super Studio's work. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this architectural collective. They're very famous in the 70s, and they have made multiple radical challenges or proposals to disrupt the kind of mainstream this disciplinary movement at that time. So Super Studio's work operates between utopian fantasy and disruptive reality, using furniture as micro-urbanism to manufacture provocations of care. As you can see here, they look into the multi-uses of like a single furniture to generate new urban dynamics, which is something that we, my office and I are super fascinated by. Following this ethos, we came up with a series of movable furniture that facilitates the interplay between farming and sharing food, between delivering and consuming food. And this series of furniture, entitled Balconies, encompass vegetables growing racks, kitchen worktops, foldable dining tables, chairs, and so on and so forth, which is encapsulated in this render here. And also to illustrate, this series of furniture's spatial capacities, a series of speculative drawings were produced to to stimulate, the proliferation of this domestic infrastructure in different exteriors and interior scenarios. In the exterior, which is captured here, these pieces of furniture are housed within standardized greenhouse on the rooftop. Based on different levels of lockdown, the greenhouse will be operated under different conditions that range from being fully open to being fully enclosed. For instance, as you can see here, this render represents a semi-open condition. Some of the greenhouses are enclosed, representing the ongoing quarantine of certain individuals. Some are fully open, indicating the residents are liberated from the long-lasting quarantine. And as delineated in this render here, the movable planters are moved out from the greenhouse and serve as a temporary division between spaces. Cooking tables, chairs, and dining tables are convenes together for a social and cooking party between neighbors. In the interior scenario, this series of movable and operable furniture will be arranged to break down the tangible isolation between units, serving as different facilities to foster caring and sharing between residents and neighbor. If you remember one of the drawing I showed you previously, the drawing by Zoom, which was like an endless, vast interior that's divided by an infinite grid. Housing, multiple, movable furniture. So this series of drawings are heavily inspired by, that train of thought. As you can see here, these interior components are no longer static objects that confine domestic interiors as an isolated realm of privacy. Instead, these objects operated as materials that provoke new relationship between individual and collective, producing a new set of social codes and spatial politics that craft new modes of collectivity and domesticity in the community. As illustrated in this drawing here, the invasion of the movable furniture has destabilized the domestic spaces. For instance, the bathroom is no longer merely enclosed by blank walls. It's converted into a shower embedded within an interior garden rendered by a party of movable planters and vegetables. The bedroom is no longer just a place for sleeping and dreaming. It's a bed within the instant nature with rocks that resonate with Albert Frey's house in Palm Springs, a place of resting in the middle of food growing and sharing, in oasis of food sharing and growing. A kitchen is no longer just an isolated place for food making. With the fluid and malleable nature of the furniture, the kitchen is situated within an interconnecting social network bolstered by the domestic infrastructure care, which in this case is a series of furniture. It forms a community of food that foster new collective memories in domestic territories. As you can see, this series of drawings are, all the drawings I presented here are very speculated. One of our goals is to, we perceive this series of drawing as a kind of like abstract, as a kind of like, apparatus for any tangible movements engaged with the reality. So after we produce this series of furniture, we decided to select 7 pieces of furniture and fabricated them in the exhibition's exterior venue. And these modules are made up of standardized components and are joined by L-shaped corner bracket and bolt, which could be easily assembled and disassembled. It's very similar to the kind of like IKEA furniture idea, which is to make it very accessible and very very accessible to this kind of mundane object. And this object could be easily assembled, disassembled based on the user's preferences. And to enhance the flexibility of interactive nature of the installation, we prepare vegetable seed, seedlings, and growing tools on the exhibition site, inviting visitors to cultivate vegetables in the installation and later take home produce. So this is an image of the installation on the exhibition site. It's kind of fascinating to see the kind of like contrast between this kind of informal and sort of bottom-up objects to and the kind of like extremely formal, like mega structure in the background. And they're also encouraged to reconfigure these pieces of furniture in the rooftop. They're imagining their own ways of engaging the furniture to better align with their idea of how to utilize this series of furniture. So this series of furniture, Balcony, revolves around the themes of smallness and informality that is more attentive to quotidian activities of everyday life. It unfolds the dynamics between making and sharing, and between sharing and caring, calling attention to small-scale interior objects as tools of spatial intervention that project new possibilities towards architecture and the city. And to better showcase the processes and ideas of this project, in the indoor exhibition venue, we display a furniture module together with a tabloid that was used to collect and disseminate the collective knowledge about food and space. So a side project from Belgium is to collect story related to food and space. For instance, we ask audience response to the following questions, including what's your favorite ingredient growing up, and what's the kind of like spatial what's the space when this kind of like food related activities happen. It was also intended to produce a new forms of community engagement in the context of architectural biennale. For instance, one of the visitors left a note about how their family used the balcony space for cooking and growing vegetables at the same time, and how loofahs could be used for cooking and dishwashing. And the process of collecting and disseminating knowledge is informal and ongoing. It's intended to invite comments, notes, reviews, and critiques in different formats, calling attention to themes of care, such as public health, mutual aid, and community engagement. So this is Belgian at Princeton School of Architecture. So we showcase, this kind of food collective format in the backdrop, inviting students and faculty to contribute to the story. Lastly, I want to briefly unpack the process of material transformation in this project. Due to the travel constraint, I was stuck in the US at that time. And actually before, during, and after the project was built. So in order to facilitate the communication process, we use WeChat, a social media platform that is quite prevalent in China. We all have different roles in this project. For instance, one of my colleagues was in charge of all the logistics. Another one was a contractor for the project who communicated with the fabrication factory. One was solely in charge of assembling the installation. So because of the quarantine process, each of us had to take a very specific role in this project. It kind of challenged how we really perceive, the role of an architect or even like a designer. And as you can see, we constantly have to rely on a lot of photo sharing, photo editing to communicate our idea. And also during the pandemic, since this project happened during the pandemic, there are always there are actually multiple unexpected lockdowns, and because of that, because of that, only the neighbors living near that area could access the venue. So a lot of children and a lot of family living in that neighborhood came to the exhibition site and took care of the installation and took care of the plant. And also after the exhibition, we donated our installation to a local nonprofit organization that has done a lot of community farming and gardening projects. And so basically at the last day of the exhibition, my colleagues went to the site and helped them disassemble the furniture pieces. Quite rewarding to see this project play out and how long it lasts, with most of the pieces intact after the hustle and bustle of the whole biennale. And this is where it is right now. Belgium is on a rooftop in a community space. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you so much.
If you have questions, feel free to drop them in the Discord or in Zoom. We'll just take a couple minutes to field any questions that we have for Lee. One question here from Philip is, have you considered how the ability to move the furniture to reconfigure the interior landscape can respond to environmental shifts, especially temperature at the scale of the day or the season? I'm thinking about a combination of your project with work like Philippe Raum, who investigates spaces as a gradient of temperature.
Yeah, Philip, that's a really good point. I haven't really thought about this specific like how to relate these projects to certain environmental shifts. The primary focus of this project is to figure out how affordable and how accessible this series of furniture could be, and how this series of furniture could engage different constituents or different communities to do to do the work, which is to plant certain vegetables, and as well as using that as a site for social gathering. That was a kind of like primary um, uh, um, driving force for this project, and also these projects we sort of like relies a lot on how user using how neighbors use this specific installation. So it relies on the theme of like uncertainties a lot. So basically we didn't want to prescribe a specific orientation or specific actions or movements of this of this series of furniture. Instead we want to just propose a very neutral framework in which everyone could have their could operate and also in which everyone could contribute to. So I think that is a kind of like original idea that we had. I hope that answered your question.
Thank you. We have another question from the Discord that's sort of like parallel to your talk, which was from Ursa on Lock. What would be the best way for you to consider long-term repair strategies with community members? What strategies are there to pass on that maintenance knowledge?
So maintenance of this specific installation, or just a general thought about how we could propose actions of repair for a community.
I think it was more general.
Yeah, I think that's a tough question. I would say there so many different there's so many different communities, right? And it's pretty hard to propose a universal principle or a universal solution, for any type of maintenance or repair. So from my perspective, my work has been revolving around the idea of informality and or movability or adaptability, proposing a framework that allow the majority of community members to work with. I think that's my take. One way to think of that. That's how I see. As an architect, how we could contribute to this kind of framework of repair, which is to work with like spatial elements and try to make them as as accessible to our constituents, to our communities. In this case, we just want to make this make the whole installation easy to understand, easy to move, easy to assemble and disassemble, and also have some sort of like funny colors or funny spatial gesture. So that's how we approach this specific project, and how we understand how architecture or how interior objects could contribute to forms of repairs and resilience for our broader community.
Thanks so much, Lee. I think that is all of our questions so far. Looks like everything. Yep.
Yeah.
But thank you. That
Thank you
was a
so
really
much
great talk.
for.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate this opportunity to share this specific work with all of you. And I really appreciate Jerry's comments about the pandemic helped this project to move forward, because that was really the case. We worked with a lot of constraints during the pandemic. For instance, we're not allowed to enter that specific space, the exhibition venue, unless we have like a 24-hour health code. That's what we call. And because of the policy constantly change, we have to really consider how to make sure this whole thing could be assembled in a day. So the constraint actually contributes to the idea of this project, and later on, this project was moved further by our community members because they were the one who essentially came and took good care of our plants. So after 3 months, we actually harvest some tomatoes, we harvest some green onions, and we had like a food gathering, at the last, well, maybe the last week of the exhibition. So it was a very fun experience to have. And also that was the end of the pandemic and everybody was so excited about having, about having like an outdoor gathering event. So we have a lot of audience attending, the last day of the event. So it was really, rewarding. And I agree, the pandemic helped this project, unfortunately, to move forward in a very positive way. So
Awesome. Thanks so much for the talk. And